All right, here we go. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We will be presenting Navigating the Multi-Generational Workforce by Mark Stevens. So just a little housekeeping before we get started. This session is being recorded. We'll post a link to the recording and slide deck on the webinar page of our website as soon as it's available. And typically that's posted in the afternoon. To ensure a high quality recording, all attendees are encouraged to mute your mic. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your Zoom control panel. We will try to get to them if time allows at the end of the presentation. Finally, I'll take a minute here to introduce our presenter. Mark Stevens is a human resources professional with a strong legal background who works with organizations of every size. Mark offers training programs to create a powerful, productive, and safe work environment so that every employee may reach their full potential and value. Without further ado, Mark, take it away.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here. We have just a few minutes together, and I wanted to focus on this important topic. One of the things that I think is so valuable in this day and age is understanding others, no matter what they are. And this training focuses in on one of the great delineators, age. Age is such a unique concept for all of us. I might be semi-retired. I may be working with someone who is 40 years younger than me. When I say the word, hey, I'm going to go, anybody remember the 8-track? And people go, huh? What are you talking about? What's an 8-track? When I think, oh, y'all missed out. Well, those kind of things all flow in from our lives into the workforce. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about age is more than a number, and generation is more than a box we click off. Generations are so valuable because around every 20 years or so, in fact, we'll be talking all about it, there comes a new different type of background, a new different type of group of individuals. So I would like for us to think about when we're talking about age, we're talking about different generations, I really need to be careful about generalizing. I do not want to put people into pigeonholes. Anyone can be anything. What we're focusing on is, all right, some of the influences behind different generations. So what happens when we don't get into trouble when we're generalizing and trying to understand a whole group of individuals. We do get into trouble if we make inaccurate generalizations. So I've been through a lot of studies and looked at things in order for us to not stereotype others. If I say, oh, you're a millennial, well, all of these things come into my head and I start thinking about the stereotype. One of the things is I do not want us to be stereotyping others. I want us to use this time together, and what we will be doing in the full training is to focus on, okay, there are different reasons why different generations are what they are. And we all understand that. So we don't want to stereotype and think, well, because you are of this generation, then that's how you are. I'll give an example. The millennials, 38% of millennials, according to statistics, have tattoos. So if I'm going around thinking that every millennial has a tattoo, then I'm not being accurate and I'm not being appropriate. And I want to keep from doing that, especially when I'm in the workplace, because the question is, how do I get all of us to work together? How do I bridge those gaps? Well, to do that, we need to really understand each generation that could be in the workforce. So here's what we're going to do briefly. We're going to recognize the challenges of each different generation. And then at the very end, I'm going to offer up 4 different ideas on how to engage each different generation. The generations The concept of the generation gap came around in the late 60s because the traditionalist, or the greatest generation, so, as Tom Brokaw put it, and the baby boomer generation started having a great split. So we want to talk about these ideas of a generation gap occurred through, and there are these breakdowns, as we'll see, the baby boomers, the Gen Xers, the millennials, Gen Y, and now even the Gen Zs. We're going to talk about each of these, and in context of three different things. One is the economy they grew up in. Two is how parents were involved. And three is how the society around them was developing. So with that, everyone, let's do this. First of all, we're going to talk about the traditionalists. They came up in the World War II. They were very much aware of this world around them. When I think of traditionalists, I think of my father. He tells me about what it was like to be living in World War II. He talks about the concept of working through and living through the Depression, of being involved with what the effort was and the war effort was, and how everyone in this country was dealing with the war effort. And prior to that, my father would tell me about the Great Depression, what it was like he lived in Houston and with his family, what it was like when he was a child, and people who were going through the Great Depression. Those made a giant impact on him. You see here the Tuskegee Airmen, the World War II, Iwo Jima, the Pearl Harbor, and up through lines to get polio vaccines. The traditionalists came into the workforce, and even though they're rarely in the workforce now, I want to be aware of them. I want to know, because they're our customers, they're our voters, they're people that literally created the organizations that we're in now. They were the ones that put the organizations together to begin with. And that's one of the things that I find so interesting is we went through World War II. The World War II was it was a victorious war for the United States, and people came back to work, and they believed in the concept of a hierarchical organization. You had chains of command, you had leadership. People followed the leader. They had the concept for this generation was you had duty, you would establish your service, and then you would be dutiful to your organization. You would fall in line, you would conform, and you would work with others. So we think about a strong work ethic. With also the concept of eventually, because like in the Great Depression, things weren't just going to happen. You needed to delay, you needed to work, and you were going to end up getting some type of gratification down the road. There was a conformity and respect for authority, and most of the people in this generation lived linear lives. They went to work, they had children, they worked for the same companies a lot for their entire careers. And this was how they were setting up the work organizations after World War II. Next came the baby boomers. The baby boomers were there. And something I'd love for you to write down or take a note of, because I found it so fascinating, because following World War II, there was a great deal of optimism in our country. And we're speaking in general terms through this. There was a great deal of optimism. We just come back from the war. People were going back to college, the GI Bill. The future was bright, and in many different aspects of our society. And people started going back to college, being educated. And the boomers, right after World War II, they had this full of optimism. They had the greatest generation, they came back, they had all of this optimism, and they started having babies, and they had babies like they never had babies before, and it was a boom. And this optimism turned into children, and children were now the baby boomers were the largest generation ever to be in the United States. And knowing with that, this country wasn't ready for the boomers to be in our structure. The schools weren't ready for them, public schools. There wasn't a lot of space. So boomers early on had to figure out how they were going to find their space at the lunch table, or how they were going to find their space on the little league team. They went up through school, they went through high school, and went through college. It was a very there just wasn't enough space and room for everyone, so it was very competitive and understanding in that way. And that was up to the early 60s. Then there was a second half to the boomer generation. That, as we move from the 50s and the early 60s, we have around 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 20-year-olds. What we have there is they start seeing Vietnam, and they start seeing a change from that belief in World War II that hierarchy was appropriate and you didn't question it. It was complete duty of loyalty and service. There was a lot of questioning when we went into the 1960s, and that developed into ideas of, you know what, I don't know if I can trust the government as like my parents did. There was a change, and by the start of the 1970s, the generation gap had sort of really grown to a canyon size, because from the greatest generation to the boomer generation, there wanted to be a change in the values, and that was reflected in the music. It was reflected in the politics. It was reflected in societal views. So generally speaking, when it comes to the boomers created this understanding of following the greatest generation. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to be loyal. I'm going to find a job. I'm going to be and work inside this organization. If you are loyal to me, I will be loyal to you. And this kept going through this era. There was optimism, and then there was pessimism. The baby boomers really did reshape society. So we know those folks are still in the workforce, and those folks, that's me, we're still in the workforce. So we move from the baby boomers to Gen X. And Gen X was a very interesting generation where the greatest generation, they had babies. It was a big growth. By the time Gen Xers came around, there was less children being born. In fact, boomers were thinking in these terms, and this is general. They were thinking in these terms of there are many different ways to look for happiness rather than having only a family or having children. So the boomers were exploring different ways, and these children were born, and Gen Xers. And during this time, the Gen Xers grew up in families that were not in marriage, that were in divorces. There was 29% of Gen Xers as opposed to 15% during the baby boomer era. So a lot of the Gen Xers lived through in daycares. They were called latchkey kids, if y'all remember that term, and they were on their own. What they did was, according to the studies, it started looking outside the family to friends, to find family, to find and create relationships. They were really focused on themselves. It was a smaller group, really diverse and very self-reliant. But growing up in that atmosphere, a couple of things started happening. It was more diverse. I say they became cautious and skeptical because they were living life on their own and they were making it on their own. So when they started having children, they said, you know what? And they started going to work as well. They go, I want to love my children. I want to focus on my children. I'm going to be different than my boomer parents. So I want to have a work-life balance, and that affects the workplace. This work-life balance became a big part because in the boomer generation, it was, okay, you work hard, you focus. It was kind of, they were very, as I saw earlier, kind of workaholic. It was focused that way, not in a negative, but it was focused on work. Then the Gen Xers came up with a work-life balance. I want to work. I kind of understand work, but it's not going to be the end all and be all. There were some real critical things that happened while the Gen Xers were coming together and inside the workforce where we are now. There was a tipping point, and it's out of a book. It's called The Enthusiastic Employee, Giving Employees What They Want. I remember reading this. That concept of loyalty to work changed dramatically. And it was around 1994 to 1996. For the first time in the history of IBM, they had had a profit. They had made a profit in their stocks. And what the board of directors said is, we want to have more of a profit. So in the first time in their history is they did layoffs in order to increase the stock price. And that became a message. It became one of these things of, you know what, we're going to value other things than loyalty to the company. And Gen Xers saw this, and that's why there's a lot of skepticism in, I don't know how long I'm going to be here. You know, if you don't like me being here and doing my thing, then you know what, I will go find something else. I want to live a work-life balance. I want to have to be more informal. I want to be more casual, because here's the thing. This is not my mother or father's workforce. I don't know how long I'm going to be here, and I want to focus on the things that are important to me. We move from the Gen Xers to the millennials. The millennials are an incredibly viable, powerful generation. In fact, 25% of the United States population is now millennials. The Gen Xers started having kids, having a lot of children, and now it is grown into the largest part of our workforce as we continue to move forward into the late 2020s. The interesting thing about millennials is the Gen Xers who had their parents that they were in sort of daycare, they were doing not completely focused in a general sense on the children per se, and I mean that in the most generic term, is now when they were having these Gen Xers were having children, and they were completely focused on, all right, I've made this choice. I want to have children, and I'm going to be involved in their lives. And what things happened is it kind of led to this sort of in a euphemistic way, that the parents, these Gen Xers were so involved, they were called helicopter parents, or they were activity directors for their kids. They were very, very involved, which was fantastic for the millennials, because millennials love being part of their parents' lives. In fact, the study said that millennials, around 50 to 60% of them, maybe 70%, sorry, have great relationships with their families. They want to be involved with their families. And more than half of the millennials say that their mother or father are their heroes. There's a tight bond, and the millennial was offered up great opportunities and we're going to give you everything that we possibly can, and we want you to succeed. So millennials understand this. When I go into the workforce, I am wanted. I am optimistic. I'm very confident. And something that's so important about millennials is they are digital natives. The statistics show that a millennial will reach out to grab their iPad or their iPhone every 7 to 8 minutes during an 8-hour work period. The telephone for the millennial is a body appendage. There was a survey said that millennials rather give up their sense of smell than give up their phones. It is an important part of their lives. The technology gives them power. It gives them knowledge. And what was happening before this whole expanse when it came to millennials is they were taught by their families, or it became part of their lives, to be consumers. In fact, they are such strong consumers is they needed different search engines to go out and find. These are the people on Amazon these days. They really do focus on the idea of, all right, here's what I want, and I want to lean into technology. It's what I live with every day. And the other side of what was happening too, which is so important for us to remember, is the millennials grew up in a different kind of age. They grew up with 9/11 as a big part of their lives. They grew up with Columbia disaster when it came to the shuttle. They grew up with the Columbine shooting. They grew up with different types of major tragedies that happened in the lives. The Oklahoma bombing occurred in 1995. So this became part of their lives. And what they saw and what they learned was this: if I'm going to go into the workforce, I'm going to love what I do. I'm not going to spend a lot of time living for the future, because in the world around me, I cannot guarantee to what that future is going to look like, or if it's going to even be here. So these millennials live for the day. They have debt. It was more expensive to go to college than ever. The average millennial has 3 credit cards with over $10,000, or an average of $10,000 worth of debt. It is a different world for them, and we need to be able to articulate and work with them. The last generation is a Generation Z. These are the people that are now coming into our workforce, everybody. They are very, very smart. They are globally connected. And here's the thing that they're learning from millennials is, I don't even have to go to work anymore. I want to be an entrepreneur. I can use the internet. I can have Instagram. I can have blogs. All of these things that I thought were science fiction, people are making. If they have giant followings, they can make 6 figures. So they're thinking about, I am going to live my life my way. The Gen Z is very focused on diversity. They are very in tune with LGBTQ, with transgender. In fact, the 75% of studies from Gen Z say that they are completely accepting of non-binary people. This is a new age and a new group of individuals that are completely focused and savvy on technology. And they're thinking this way: money's not that big of a deal. I'm going to earn it. I'm going to be able to make it. What I want to do is I want to change the world. I'm focused more about the world economy and the global climate and different issues along that. I want people to be safe. I want us to, there was, focus on the issue with with shootings and those type of things that have really affected the Gen Z mindset. So they want to build a safer and better planet. So with all of those people together, here we go. We have all these folks working together inside the workforce, looking to be, okay, I'm focusing on what I want. I'm interested in what's important now. One of the things that the millennials said is, in their studies for them, is, you know what, I am wanted. And if there is a policy that I don't like, you know what, I'm just going to ignore it. If it's a policy that doesn't make sense, why would we do something that doesn't make sense? I'm living for today. I don't know what's happening next. So we have to think about, whoa, what is going on with that group? So how do the different generations fit with each other? This is the most recent slide that I have regarding the labor force. I'm putting together one for 2020 in the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. You can see in 95, boomers were ruling the workforce. Now Gen Xers are leading the workforce and Gen Ys are right behind. And here come the Gen Zs, and they are moving further. We need to be able to find a way, everyone, to communicate with each other, to find value with each other, to not create conflicts based on age at work. And that's what the full training is about. Where does it leave us? Despite our differences.
Mark, sorry to interrupt, but it's your 5-minute warning.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're
Despite
welcome.
all our differences, I want everybody to know here, and I've seen it in my own life and I saw it through the studies, everyone has the same basic needs. Each generation tries to meet those needs in a different way. And what I would like to offer you today going away, and I hope you come back to the full training, is 4 strategies for multi-generational harmony. The first is the tried and true. It is a North Star for me: establish respect. It doesn't matter how old we are, how experienced we are. If I come in and I go, no matter what generation you're with, I'm going to respect you as a human being. I'm going to give you dignity as a human being. And I want us to be mutual in being able to develop relationships with each other. Respect is a key. How do I do that? Treat others as I want to be treated, knowing that every person wants to be respected. I need to make that connection with others. And in doing that, how do I go about learning how to respect others? Ask, communicate. When each group respects each other, all groups thrive. Establish respect. The second is be flexible and accommodating. We're 2022 now. Each generation has its own wants and needs. As we just talked about, I need to find ways of working with each. I need to know what makes generations tick and then be able to go, okay, I want to accommodate some older part of the generations. I may, like, well, let's say Generation X. They are now working and they're usually in a sandwich generation, that they're taking care of older parents and they're taking care of children. Well, how do I work with them inside the organization? That's what we want to talk about. We want to be able to accommodate and get the most out of individuals. The last couple of things here, and I appreciate you very much being part of this time together, is avoid stereotyping. From gender to age to race, stereotyping, we need to not keep our biases. They may be unconscious, not think of people in terms of, oh, you're a boomer, oh, you're a Gen Z, like the millennials, they're tech obsessed. I have my niece and nephew, they were born in 2001. I've never seen them without a laptop or an iPad, never. And part of me goes, oh my goodness, what, did they ever read a book? Well, Mark, I need to stop. And I need to go, these generations, I'm not going to be stereotypical. I'm going to accept them. And how do I avoid learning stereotyping? Is learn about them, is to talk with them, what we find out about their experiences, about their lives, about what are the things that they enjoy, so I can bring not stereotypes, but individuals into my life. And the last one is this, everyone: learn from one another. I believe those that are at retirement age, they can bring so much value. They have institutional knowledge. They have probably know about some equipment that no one's ever seen before. I want them to be able to share their knowledge, that value, with those in other generations following them. Then in the same time, I want that multi-generational sharing to go back the other way. There's a lot of technology that I don't understand. I want to learn from someone, and I have. How do I use Zoom? How do I effectively create a program that that is valuable and available for those in a social media and multimedia environment, in a marketing environment? I want people to tell me and explain that with me. So if we learn from one another, then all of a sudden those generational walls can be brought down. So everyone, those are 4 ideas: respect, learning from one another, valuing each other and not stereotyping each other. Those are the kind of things we're going to deal with in great detail. We're also going to talk about points of friction between the generations based upon those stereotypes and how people react, and myths about each generation. So I hope you'll consider coming back and being part of this full navigating multi-generational workforces. I believe this is really the topic of today. Age, generations, it's all part of our lives. And I sometimes go, I just don't understand you. When I'm at work, why don't you just do what I tell you to do? Well, there are a lot of reasons and influences on those in different generations. So I want to thank y'all so much for spending this time with me, this 30 minutes. I want to please have you consider coming back to our training, and it's going to be in a few weeks down the road. And now I want to hand it back over to Marissa. All of you, please have a great day. Thank you so much for being part of this time together. I hope you got a little bit of something out of it. Thank you, Marissa.
Of course. And thank you, Mark. Thank you for being here. And to the rest of you, thank you for being here as well. I hope you have a great rest of your Friday. I posted the link to the recording and the slide deck in the chat, and I will do that again. If you want to register for the full class, I put that link in there as well. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I will post my email address in here as well. But that's all for today. Thank you, folks.
Thank y'all, everyone. Take care. Does anybody, I don't see any questions out there, Marissa. I'm looking through the chat.
No, no questions. Linda asked why Gen Z was more susceptible to caring about the environment, and another Linda answered her and pretty much explained that
Very good.
the younger generations have grown up hearing about climate change their entire life.
Yes. No, excellent. Oh, we wanted to hang out here for a couple of more minutes to be sure that everybody, if they had any questions or anything. So thank you very much,
Sure,
Marissa.
of
And
course. Brenda, you can access the link cpshr.us, and then scroll all the way down, go to webinars, and click the webinar link.
And Marissa, I don't know if you guys want to fix one of the slides. I just happened to notice that the one for the millennials has 1981 to 2000, and then the slide after that has, 2001, and the slide after it has 2000.
Thank you for that catch. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Oh, it's just me. I noticed all those things. I can't help it.
No, that's great. Good catch. Yeah, it's 2000, then 2001 is the next start of the generation. Thank you, Linda.
But Mark, I want to thank you. This was fabulous. And I'm with HCD, and we had a similar training, and that was one of the most favorite ones I've ever had. So I want to thank you for yours. This was really great. And I look forward to the full one.
Thank you very much, Linda. I love to hear that. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, you communicated everything wonderfully. I truly enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. And I love to have a great third eye looking over the material. So thank you for that note. Remember, Marissa, help me with that, please.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you. Take care, Linda.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
All right, if there are no further questions, we're going to hop off. Again, thank you guys for being here and have a great weekend. And thank you again, Mark.
Thank you very much. Take care.